Well, welcome back to the Kettle Additions. I'm Austin McIlroy. I'm the master brewer of Cabin Boys Brewery. And today I have one of my very favorite guests on, Lisa McIlroy, my lovely wife and president and marketing director of Cabin Boys. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How much did I have to twist your arm to be here?
Well, kind of a lot, actually. I have this weird thing that I guess the audience should know. I don't love the sound of my voice on recordings, so I try to avoid these types of things. And I was joking with Austin. Normally, I pawn him off on to do all the interviews, but when he's the interviewer, I have no one else to be my scapegoat.
That was my evil plan.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep. Well, I've pondered how I was going to coerce you onto the podcast, and I'm really excited for you to be on here because you have a lovely story to tell.
Oh, thank you.
So tell everybody where you're from and how you got into doing art, because today I want to ask you how art has influenced the craft beer industry and how you think it is such a pivotal point of being able to tell your story and how you like to design your art to tell the story of Cabin Boys and how you can express yourself within that realm.
Okay, was that one question or five?
It might have been five. Tell your story first and how you got into art and how it led you into the beer world.
Okay. Well, I actually got into art in high school, and I always liked art and making art and drawing and painting. And I always took art classes like in school and stuff. But my first passion and what I actually thought I was going to go to college for was theater.
Okay.
And then through theater, if you ever did community theater or theater in college or high school, you know that it's a fully hands-on thing where it's just this ragtag team of weird creative people that just make things happen. And so if you were in theater long enough, you not only usually act, but you're helping build the sets, paint the sets, do the stuff, do the costumes, just depending on what that theater program's budget was. And so I started by painting sets and helping design some programs for our high school theater shows and stuff. And my theater teacher was like, "Man, you're really good at this." And I was like, "I am? I don't know. I just thought this would look good." And she's like, "It does. It looks really good." And in high school, my senior art teacher was like, "Yeah, she's right. You're going to be an artist." And I was like, "No, I want to be a director or write plays." And she's like, No. You might do that for a little bit, but you're really an artist. You're going to come back to painting and drawing because that's what you do.
No, that's really cool.
And so those teachers actually set me on a path right in my last semester of high school to change my mind about college.
Oh, my word.
Yeah.
Which is good for me.
It was good for you because I actually had a roommate and a scholarship with a theater program in Southern Illinois at Millikan University. I was all ready to go. And the weekend before high school graduation, I changed my mind on where I wanted to go to school. And the only college that would have me that late was a small private school in Edmond, Oklahoma, of all places, called Oklahoma Christian University.
Woohoo!
And they happened to have a surprisingly amazing art program. And I just remember calling their art department and talking to them, and they were like, "Yeah, well, we had accepted you, but you declined, but we just put you back in the accepted thing and send us a portfolio and we'll see if we have any scholarships left." And they had a small one left, and I qualified, and I was like, "Oh, hey, what the hey, if I don't like Oklahoma, I'll just transfer after my first semester." I ended up staying for 4 years, ended up meeting you, making a bunch of lifelong friends. And although we've moved away from Oklahoma a few times, I've, decided to settle here, and it's been just kind of a wild ride.
Right on. What was your first painting that on that stage? What did you paint? That was so enamoring to your director that it would have shifted your life to go into art?
It wasn't on the stage, but the first thing that I did that my theater teacher was like, wow, that was really good, was we had to choose a play, like kind of write a report on it, and design programs and things for a play that we were imaginarily going to put on, and then like kind of write up like a plan on how we were going to do that. And I chose My Fair Lady, and for the program I hand painted a portrait of Audrey Hepburn from My Fair Lady, and she was like, whoa, that looks really good. And I was like, cool, okay.
Right on. So for you guys that do not know, who are listening, the reason that we're talking about art is because Lisa does all of the visuals for Cabin Boys. So she's the president and marketing director, but you make everything for the brewery.
Yeah. Well, everything visual.
Everything visual.
For the most part. And it's fun because I've been able to expand my team in the last year plus. And so I have a social media director now who's doing all the posting and stuff, which is fabulous. And she's a wonderful local photographer, Jess Trout. And so she does all the photography now. But then for about the first 5 years, 6 years of the brewery,
yep,
I did all the photography, website, social posting, chalkboard signs in the tap room, even all the way to the beers on the cans. So I like to say I'm a very affordable, you can get my art very affordably. All you gotta do is pay $10 for a 4-pack at your local liquor grocery store, and you get to walk home with some art and put it in my fridge and then drink it.
Yeah, there you go. So you're accepted to Oklahoma Christian in Edmond, Oklahoma, and let's finish your story. So, okay. What? Because you may have created a Audrey Hepburn painting that directed your life into a completely different trajectory than you were planning.
Sure.
What is your most favorite style of art to express what's going on in your brain and how you can tell your own story outside of any of the craft beer industry?
That's hard. So yeah, I think when I started pursuing art as a form of study in college, you kind of start off with all of the traditional mediums of still life and figure drawing and real realism and stuff, and just learning all of that. And I think it was actually, here again, another professor. I've been really blessed to have really great teachers, I think.
That's awesome.
To kind of point things out that you just don't really see within of yourself.
Most great artists do. Yeah. We just went to Paris, and every single artist that was of notable character had a mentor.
That's true.
Or many mentors.
That's true. And so one of my professors was like, yeah, you are able to replicate, what you see and draw it really well. But what are all these little weird squiggles on the sides of your term papers and in your worksheets and stuff? And I'm like, what do you mean? My doodles? And he's like, yeah, you should explore these. And I've just always been a classic doodler, since elementary school. To finish my test early, just on the side, there's going to be flowers and lines and shapes and zigzags and whatever. And he just pointed out that those were unique and those were interesting. And so I just blew up those doodles and started, painting them with a brush instead of drawing them with a ballpoint pen, and did a lot of experimentation with that. And how that kind of emerged into this this kind of abstract style that I've developed over, I don't know, almost 2 decades now.
Yeah.
I don't really have a name for them, but we kind of call this subconscious abstract expression, I guess. And I love to play with line and texture. But for the brewery, I consider myself an illustrator, right? I'm telling the story of a beer, or I'm trying to sell it off of the shelf, quite literally, into your hand. And so I want to captivate the consumer to want to pick up that can and learn more about what's inside of that little vessel that's maybe beautifully decorated. But if you take a look at those illustrations, there's always some sort of overly detailed
underlining,
just lines and patterns and textures that I even still to this day, if I'm stressed out, I'll just sit at home and draw or paint these lines and textures and patterns because they've just kind of become a part of me. And
one of the first times that I saw you make art was in your art studio that was detached from the college in Edmond, and you were literally pouring white paint onto a canvas and then adding a bunch of lines over it. And I thought it was one of the coolest things on planet Earth to watch.
And that's the day you fell in love with me. No. I don't know.
Some may say, the movies would say that.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's her. Meet cute.
Yeah.
But I think to kind of follow up, and sorry if I'm talking too much.
You're good.
But on how did I get from wanting to become an artist, getting interested in art, into getting into beer? Was that the kind of...
So that's where we're going. So what, obviously I'm a little bit cheating of knowing that story and knowing how it morphed into your influence of what Cabin Boys would become. Where did you see your art in the brewery space, and how did you think that you were going to be capable of influencing what it looked like?
Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know the Cabin Boys origin stories, you have to listen to episode 1 of Kettle Additions.
Thank you for that advertisement.
Because it says how we came to be. But yeah, I kind of like to think of, I don't know, anyone who's an artist or creative, whoever had anybody tell them you'll never make money in that career. I like to think that I'm kind of the entrepreneurial poster child of all it takes is a little bit of creativity and you can make, your passion your job.
Yeah.
And so when we decided we wanted to open a brewery, you were going through beer school and all of that. It was just sort of like, cool, hey, you're married to me. And I had this background in painting, illustration, graphic design, photography already. And I'd already been actually doing some small business freelance where I was doing small business branding and logo design for other companies. So it was just like, well, hey, you're my wife, you can make us free logo, right? Nudge, nudge. I was like, of course, I would be happy to, And so that was really cool, was I got to go to Germany with you.
Correct.
While you were in school in Chicago. And my kind of research project at the time, as we were writing the business plan and putting together the bones of what our company would be, was what is our branding and what is our aesthetic going to be? And so I poured through all of my favorite big breweries, like websites, I looked at their logo designs. I looked at their can designs. I looked at older brewery companies, like go through 2 or 3 different design iterations, and was just trying to figure out why. Why did they change this? Why did they put this on their label? And just started listing off what I thought would be important based on our mission statements and stuff to us to convey as the new kids on the block in Oklahoma. Like, what would our story be? What do we want people to know? And if you look at craft beer design, it's so broad, which makes it so fun as an artist, because you really can almost do no wrong unless you forget to like put the brewery's logo on there and like say
the
what
right
the
things.
beer is, right? You do have some limitations by the federal government, of course. Like there's certain language and verbiage I have to have on every label, like the government warning and just certain words, but
the jargon that has to be on the
can, right? But for the most part, as far as design goes, you see like everything from very simple, just graphic words, just typographic, IPA really massive and it's 2 colors and that's it, all the way to really intricate illustrations and paintings and designs and stuff. And so it was almost overwhelming, actually.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I was just like, what is our style? What are we going to do? But I kind of just landed on this whimsical, illustrative style, which, it's one of those things where it's, if you're a writer, they always say, write what you know. Well, if you're an artist, kind of draw what you know. It's usually the good advice. And so I was like, okay, instead of trying to come up with a new style for myself, I'm just going to tweak my own illustrative style that I already kind of had and developed, but I'm going to make it more beer and cabin and outdoorsy specific. So
right on. What do you think is the most important part of a brewery logo to get right in that aspect of your research and how you developed Cabin Boys logo? What was the most important thing to add in or not add in into the design of the logo that you created, but also like looking at others, in your mind's eye, what sticks out to you as the most important part to grab the attention of a customer?
Okay, so when you say logo, you mean not like a beer brand can,
no,
but like,
I'm talking
the company, the name of the company, the Cabin Boys.
How it looks.
You've seen Cabin Boys Brewery's logo that I designed. It's, there's a half log with the rings on the tree and the little cabin and some trees and
Right.
So, and I actually still have sketchbooks of like 100 different thumbnail versions.
That'd be cool to release.
Of these, what was I going to make our logo look like? But generally, you want a logo to be simple enough that it can be conveyed in black and white. Because as a company, you got to think that not only is it going to need to be like a vector image that you can blow up massive and throw on a billboard one day, but also small, clean, and like readable on something as tiny as like a return address stamp.
Right.
Because this is going to go on everything. And then also, I think a good rule of thumb is that a logo should be able to have like 1 or 2 other versions simplified.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to kind of have like the full logo and then just Cabin Boys come off separate and still look good. And then I actually have another version that's like just the cabin itself, or just the cabin with just the words if I need to simplify it even further, like if the rings and the trees are too complicated. So I think having a couple of different versions, but that all tie back into that first logo. If you knew the company already, you see it and you're like, oh, yeah, that's.
You can recognize
You can recognize it. Like for Nike, it's their swish. You don't have to see the words Nike to know that it's Nike, right?
Right.
So being able to have a black and white, being able to kind of break it up and still let it be iconic enough on its own, I think those were big factors that played into my design. And then telling the company's story. You don't want, or I didn't want it to be too simple or too generic, or it just got lost and it could be any beer, any brewery, or any cabin building company, you know, right? And so it is, I hated this description at first, but it does kind of fit and it's kind of grown on me. Someone once described it as it's almost like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, which that's like the illustration company that did like Yogi Bear and all those like classic cartoons. Yeah. And I was like, oh, it's not like a cartoon, but it's
kind of National Parky.
It is. And I wanted that because I wanted to lean into the story of you and your dad building the cabin, and that kind of literally set the foundation for us to later go into business with him and build this brewery. And so I wanted it to look a little bit handmade.
Right.
And so the logo itself is actually hand drawn, and then I vectorized it and turned it into a graphic. So.
Yeah. I love that it's imperfectly perfect.
Right.
It has imbalances, but it balances itself.
Yeah. And Easter eggs, because I've had people follow us for years and not notice. I've had employees that have been with us for years and not notice these details. But if you zoom in on our logo, you will notice that the chimney on the cabin is a beer bottle.
Yep.
And I might have done it a little too abstract, but the smoke coming out of the chimney is supposed to be a grain of wheat or barley.
That's really, really cool. Tying it all back to beer.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the cabin, but I needed a little bit of that beer element in there too.
Right. So the getting to watch you go through all of the kind of morphology of your idea of what the logo looked like was just such a fun thing to experience. What do you think, just watching from a 10,000 foot level, of why the craft beers in the world have this? It kind of seems like there is no strings attached to what can be on a can.
Like, why is that?
No, the question wouldn't be why is that, but it seems to, maybe the question can be that simple.
Yeah.
But why do you think that the craft beer industry is one of the, I would say, few places that there are no rules as to what the can look like?
Right. I think it just fits the industry itself. Craft beer is a creative industry. I mean, especially like we've seen over the past 10 years, how many new styles, invented styles, you have everything from classic, clean Reinheitsgebot German beers that are made in the very traditional vein, all the way to, pastry stouts and, Sour Patch Kids, sour ale type things that just go wild and nuts. And I think that the label on the can can actually reflect that and reflect the different personalities of not only the flavors of the beers, but the people that are making them.
Yeah. What on the can? So when you're designing a new can for the brewery, and every single time that you do, it blows me away at how accurately you depict what we wanted to exemplify from the beer style to the story that needed to be matched with it. In that moment, what is going through your mind of, okay, I'm making a new piece of art
Mm-hmm.
to also sell to the customer?
Mm-hmm.
What's going through your brain of, okay, I'm having fun making something brand new, such as a new piece of art, but how do you also integrate the ability to sell it or attract the customer's eye?
So I feel like I've learned a lot in the last 6.5 years of making beer labels. Um, and I feel like there's some degree where you can strategize and strategize and strategize, and sometimes all of your like market research pays off in a big way. And then I also just think there's this like intangible factor of like sometimes you can have the most beautiful can and the best beer, and it just doesn't sell as well as you thought it would. And sometimes the complete opposite. You're like, this is just like a one-off thing, and people just like go gangbusters over it and can't get enough. And so I think that one again goes to, it's just, this is both the beer making and the art making process are creative and subjective to the individual consumers. But I can give you some very clear examples of things that were strategic. So when I first started off in our first couple of years, I was just focused about the image itself, and I would choose background colors just that fit with the art. And about halfway through, realized that I tend to paint with a lot of similar colors, and a lot of our labels were kind of blending together. And I was like, oh, darn, we need to differentiate this. And since then, every new label, I make a conscious decision before I start painting to figure out what the color scheme is first.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And the reason is because, a lot of people know our flagship Castellan Kolsch as the blue can. So I cannot I could if it was like maybe a very, very, very drastically different shade of blue, but I don't want to confuse the consumer from knowing what the Kolsch is. And so I don't want to have all these other blue cans out there, right?
Right.
And so I've even gone back as far as to rebrand background colors. We actually, our winter release, the Hollows Tripel, used to have a green background, and we made it a lavender this past year. And that was because since the first time we brewed that beer, we've come out with 918 Cerveza, and the FC Color team color is that patina green. And those greens were too similar, and I didn't want to take away from 918. So we rebranded the Hollows with this kind of magical purple, which I actually think fits the art even better.
That's awesome.
But it's just fun because I am making these conscious decisions so that if you did have like 5 or 6 of our cans all together on a shelf, they're all different bright pops of color that you would see from far away first, and then you get up closer and you can see the individual art.
And I did think it's looking at the craft beer shelf, you're looking at all sorts of different colors, mm-hmm. and making your brand, if you have the opportunity to put it on one shelf and it becomes a billboard in and of itself, is quite eye-catching in the sea of color.
Yeah, and it is hard. There's a lot of white noise, for lack of a better term, on the beer shelf because there is so much cool design out there, and bright colors and big things. And so I don't know, this was one of your questions, but we also went through a refresh on all of our cans recently. Yeah. So there's the drawing aspect and the illustration aspect of the can, but then there's also I have this template that I had where we lay all the information like our logo and the name and the ABV of the beer and the government warning label and where it was packaged and brewed, right?
Right.
And what we noticed is it was kind of getting muddled. And, early on, we thought it was really fun to add like, oh, chill it at this temperature and it's this many SRMs, it's this many IBUs. And then we had these like really fun descriptions of the beer. And then it was just sort of like, is anybody reading that, or is it just a bunch of words on a can where we just really needed to say like the letters IPA really big?
Right.
So that people know what the beer is. And so we simplified. Well, I simplified the design. So now all of those new designs are actually just started rolling out within the last month. And so it still looks like Castelline. It still looks like Trail Magic. It still looks like Going Stag, but the amount of words and graphics are a little bit more simplified.
How hard is it to take a template that has been in place for 5 years and refreshing it and creating something that looks the same, but tells what you want it to say on the can better?
I wouldn't say difficult, because for one, there's this like human nature of like, oh, but this is safe and I've been doing it this way and it's been working for so long, but it really wasn't perfect. And also, if anyone's a designer in any type of way, well, actually, I can correlate it to brewing. The simplest things are the hardest to do right?
That's right.
Like what we would consider as a consumer, the simplest beers, which would be like lagers, are the hardest to do right because there's no room for error.
Right.
And so that's the same with design. The more minimal it is, the more it's going to look really, really off if it's not placed just right.
Yeah.
But I think I did a good job, so I don't know.
The cans look beautiful.
Audience, you'll have to give us feedback in the comments if you've seen the new cans and if you like them or not,
or
if you even noticed.
Yeah, the best part of it is if you did your job right,
no one noticed. Really,
no one really would notice, but would have their eyes catch on the can longer and better.
Yeah,
and it describe what's in the can more efficiently.
Yeah.
So okay. To try and kind of wrap it up, to make it fun, if there was an aspiring designer or artist that wanted to design a beer can or design a t-shirt even, what would be your one thing to say to them in advice for creating something that someone would actually buy?
I think honestly, just start making mock-ups of things. If you are a young designer and you're reading the blogs of like, how do I do this professionally? Or if you're in school, your professors are probably already telling you this. You've got to, curate your portfolio. So if you're interested in package design or if you're interested in merch design, do some mock-ups of some fake beers, do some mock-ups of some like t-shirts or whatever and start submitting them to places. And I kind of think it's also just relationship. I mean, I had an in because I was part of the founding member of the company. So
you've got some skin in the
game. I got to hire myself, but there's so many craft brewers out there that don't have in-house designers that pay that would rather pay local designers or local people, because again, as an industry, we're really great about supporting our community, and would maybe even prefer working with someone that's young and green, that's going to just have a unique voice for their brand, as opposed to some big agency that maybe has a ton of clients. I personally would see the value in that. It's like, hey, I get them while they're young, and then this is the look for our company for maybe the rest of his company. And then, hey, that's some job security too, right?
Right.
And so I think it's, you've got to be able to make those relationships, be willing to put your work out there, and just keep at it and just keep growing with it and learning. And if I can make a plug, I'm actually co-curating with another friend of mine from Oklahoma Christian, who is the executive director at Norman Firehouse Art Center. And we are doing a brewing design exhibit that's actually going to start February, and it's going to be in that gallery until April. And it features 5 different beer artists in the state,
right on.
And different craft beers. So it's obviously me with Cabin Boys, Heirloom Rustic Ales, Stone Cloud, Equity Brewing in Norman, and Rough Tail Brewing. So we're going to have a panel discussion where you can come meet the artists and see their stuff, but you could also just go into the gallery during the hours and see all of their label art on display. And it's going to be a really good overview of how different and unique beer labels can actually be. So
that's really cool. I'm excited to see that. I almost forgot that was happening. We've got a lot going on.
It's good to be busy.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for obliging me on coming on to the podcast. I know that you very much don't like doing this sorts of things.
Anything for you, sweetheart.
Well, right on. Well, thank you guys for listening to us gab about our lives and tell you a little bit of this industry. And I hope that you guys are learning something. If you like listening to this, please tell a friend and like and subscribe. You can find this podcast on any platform that you like listening to podcasts on. But the best thing that you can do is tell a friend, rate it, like it, subscribe to it. And I will be recording another podcast for you next week of a story of my life in the beer world. Maybe I think it'll be about a beer style that all of you guys like to drink. So tune in next week on Wednesday. Thank you guys. This is Kettle Additions with Austin McIlroy.